they're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent to them. What you represent to them is freedom.
If you have the inconsistency, then you're really not defending liberty.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
I'm going to bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head.
Hostility against every form of tyranny over the minds of man.
This is the Whiskey and Rebellion podcast.
The history of the United States reads like a plot constructed by a writer in some epic story. It doesn't even seem like history. Misfits from Europe left their prosperous homelands at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution to escape persecution and live freely. And truly free. No safety nets, no timeouts, no ability to just sail home when the going got tough, and no government watching over them when they were there. The attrition rates of the initial colonists were high. They were extremely high. And sometimes whole settlements like Roanoke disappeared without a trace. Harsh winters in new environments and unknown lands led to hardship, famine, and in some cases even cannibalism. Difficulties kept appearing, but then again so did these colonists that were seeking a new life. It was more preferable to those leaving England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands to cross the Atlantic and brave what new world lay in wait, with all of its dangers and opportunity, than it was to put up with the monarchies of the old world. And soon the colonists became molded by this new world. Their hands grew hard, their backs strong, and their sense of individualism absolute. They were thousands of miles across an expanse of ocean from the civilized world, but were able to adapt and overcome, and not just adapt and overcome, but thrive. The United States, or what became known as the United States, provided the perfect petri dish for an experiment on individual freedom. We were able to get rid of the thousands of years of human conditioning towards subjugation and move beyond this event horizon that had never been explored before. Generations passed, and the lives full of freedom that the colonists enjoyed became so engraved in American culture that taxes and laws that were minuscule compared to the ones that we experience today were enough to send the first Americans to war. A ragtag country of fishermen, farmers, fur traders, and drunkards stood unyielding to what was, at the time, the largest, most advanced empire in human history. It was the empire that the sun never sat on. The American Revolution represented more than just the red versus blue. It represented that for the first time in human history, the people wanted to form a government subjected by natural law, rather than having natural law subjected by government. The 56 delegates to the Continental Congress risked everything when signing the Declaration of Independence. This was the final fuck you to Britain. These men, born and raised in this country, sitting on the edge of the known world in isolation, were willing to give up their lives and the freedom that they already had for what freedom was left to take. And many of them did pay the ultimate price. Of the 56 men who signed the Declaration, 5 were captured by the British as traitors and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost sons, 1 lost both sons. 9 died in battle. 24 were lawyers, 11 were merchants, 9 were farmers. But they all signed the Declaration of Independence knowing full well what penalty awaited them if they were captured. Carter Braxton of Virginia, a wealthy planter and trader, saw his ships burned by the British Navy. He sold his home and his properties to pay his debts, and he died in rags. Thomas McKean was so chased and hounded by the British that he had to move his family constantly. He served in the Congress without pay, and his family was kept in hiding. His possessions were taken from him, and his poverty was his only reward for fighting for freedom. Vandals and soldiers looted the properties of Dillery, Hall, Clymer, Walton, Gwinnett, Hayward, Rutledge, and Middleton, and at the Battle of Yorktown, Thomas Nelson Jr. noted that the British General Cornwallis had taken over the Nelson family home for his headquarters. Nelson quietly urged General Washington to open fire on the home with his cannons, and the home was destroyed, and Nelson died in bankruptcy. Francis Lewis had his home and properties destroyed. The British jailed his wife, and she died within a few months of captivity. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside by the British as she was dying. His 13 children fled for their lives, and his field and his mill were laid to waste. For more than a year, he lived in forests and caves, returning home to find his wife dead and his children vanished. A few weeks later, he died from exhaustion and what they believed was a broken heart. These men were well educated, and they were privileged. They weren't poor, or they weren't out of options, and this wasn't an act of desperation. They could have lived comfortably, and given the British what they wanted and gone about their lives. But they didn't. And they chose to fight, and they chose to fight for principles. As Samuel Adams said, if ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animated contest of freedom, go forth from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands that feed you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were once our countrymen. Or Patrick Henry saying, give me liberty or give me death. It doesn't get very more clear-cut than that. This is the idea that America was founded on, the attitude that it was built by. The founders didn't leave their secure existence to create a country that would be focused on security 240 years later. They gave up the tranquility of servitude for that animated contest of freedom that Adams talked about. This was the life that they so yearned for, just to be free. And in 1787, when the founders finished crafting the Constitution after a 4-month-long convention that went through the hot summer months in Philadelphia, the difficulty of ratification didn't come from ensuring the power of the government, but the protection from the government getting too much power. The founders did not want an empire. They didn't wish for the throne on the world stage. Freedom was all that they asked for. Life, liberty, and property was all that they desired. As John Adams said, posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you don't, I shall repent in heaven that I ever took half the pains to preserve it. The founders had great hopes for this country, but quite frankly, we fucking failed them. Somewhere along the path the United States embarked upon after it won its freedom, we lost our way. Maybe it was the Whiskey Rebellion, where troops were sent to quell an insurrection started over a whiskey tax that just a generation before, a similar tax was put on tea, which resulted in the Boston Tea Party. You gotta ask yourself, is tyranny from ourselves okay, but tyranny from abroad isn't? Is that the precedent that was set? The principles our country was founded on, the knowledge that caused us to yearn for liberty, and the foundations that catapulted America into being the most prosperous nation in history were perverted by those in power and those ignorant enough to support them. During a speech to the Virginia Ratifying Convention, James Monroe noted how prone all human institutions have been to decay, how subject the best formed and most wisely organized governments have been to lose their check and totally dissolve, how difficult it has been for mankind in all ages and countries to preserve their dearest rights and best privileges, impelled as it were by some irresistible fate of despotism. And fate is exactly what it may seem like. A nation that was once founded on individual freedom and the idea that liberty was paramount to government's ability has given way to a tyranny far worse than the British monarchy we fought to gain independence from. 20, 30, 40% taxes on individual income make the stamp and tea taxes look like nothing. When General Thomas Gage attempted to enforce a decree by the king to suppress the colonists' right to arms, the Sons of Liberty dispatched Paul Revere to warn local allies and allowed the colonists enough time to storm a 6-man British garrison, steal powder, ball, and arms, and strike the British flag. Today, bill after bill is passed through the Congress restricting weapons, ammo, and accessories, and disarming the populace that the founders fought so hard to allow arms. What separates modern-day Americans from our ancestors? They met the tyrants on the field of Lexington and Concord. They were seditious, they were traitorous, they were smugglers, spies, and loyal to principles rather than to a government. We are bombarded today with the idea that questioning a tyrannical government and those that do its bidding is un-American, that the law is the law, you have to vote for change, and we have shifted our allegiance to colors, uniforms, and titles rather than principles. Is tyranny from home different than tyranny from abroad? What does it mean to be an American? To support your government and its laws, or to support its foundational moral principles? We as Americans were given opportunity and we took it for granted. We tarnished the greatest story in history, written by some of the greatest men, and written so that we could, as they had hoped, live as freely as they fought to ensure. But frankly, we fucking pissed it all away. We don't have to, though. And that's the whole point of this podcast. We don't have to piss it all away. If we look back on what this country was founded upon, like an azimuth to a wayward traveler, we can find our way again. Make no doubt about it, we are lost. But continuing to wander around without purpose and direction will not help find our path. You can still regain your footing and march towards freedom. You have the capability to fix this country and ensure a victorious ending, a happy ending, for what I think is the greatest story ever told. You're an American, so start fucking acting like it.